Hello, everyone, and welcome to the League One Lowdown with me, Callum, and Sam. Looking ahead to this weekend's fixtures, as always. Sam, it's a Wednesday afternoon when we're recording this. How's your week been so far?
It's been much better than it was last week. Let's put it that way. A pretty solid week so far. How has your week been?
Yeah, not too shabby. Late day last night with Boston United. Playing, obviously, with what I do with work. All of the teams that we covered except one lost. So it wasn't a great day at work yesterday, but oh well. It was quite depressing, but it is what it is. Looking ahead to another bumper weekend of fixtures, and we're kind of in that point of the season where the table is starting to take a bit more shape. And for viewers of the podcast, they will know that it's not too long before we bring out the form table, and I make all my predictions based purely off that one thing. As always, we'll start with our fantasy EFL pick for the week. Sam, who have you gone with?
I have gone with Dion Charles, fresh of a hat trick last week. A pretty obvious choice, I think, this one. So I'm expecting a percentage to be quite high. He's a guaranteed starter unless he pulls up in training within the next 2 days. Fresh off a hat trick last week, playing Crawley, who we'll get onto a bit later on as one of our feature games, but looking like they're going to lose their head coach, Scott Lindsey, to MK Dons, who, funnily enough, they beat in the playoff semi-final last year. Recently taken over by a Kuwaiti owner. So off to get some more funding, shall we say, and probably better backs.
Well, wouldn't blame him. Who wouldn't? I think on a similar note, I've gone with Nathan Baxter. I just kind of think obvious choice. Bolton not necessarily in the best of runs themselves. I know they got the win out last time. That's the only win in the last 5 games. So but Crawley, again, only 1 win in the last 5 games, except that one was 5 games to go. Since then, a loss, a draw, and a loss. And you're not looking too pretty, are you, Crawley Town? They've only scored 5 goals as well all season, which I think is joint lowest in the league, isn't it? So
Yep.
You'd imagine a clean sheet is heading Bolton's way. We've got a few questions that have come in for the podcast as well. If you head over to our X on social medias, which hopefully you already follow us, because that would be quite useful. It's League One Lowdown. Scrolling on the bottom of your screens now, if you're watching us on YouTube, I've had a few questions come in. We'll do one which I think I'm probably more suited to answer in a minute, but first of all, in the week where we'll get on to manager move around in a moment, can Charlton keep hold of Nathan Jones? Sam, your thoughts on that one?
It's quite an interesting question that came in about Nathan Jones, because there was some rumours swirling around that he was in line for the Cardiff City job, being a Welshman himself. Apparently it's his hometown club as well. I presume if a club like Cardiff came, I know Charlton in my head are a bigger club than Cardiff City, but it's the opportunity to have a guaranteed championship run for a season. He could go there, keep them up, and then build for next season, where there's no guarantee that Charlton get out of League One. Obviously being the lowest scorers in the top half of the table, but being one of the best defensively, it's goal. While clean sheets do get you points, they usually get you around the top of mid-table. They need a goal scorer to start getting 10 to 15 goals, which is Charlton's biggest problem at the moment. If I'm Nathan Jones, I'm probably going to stick with Charlton, just purely because Charlton have now given him an opportunity to get back into management. Obviously, he's managed Luton and did very well. He left and went to Southampton, failed, went back to Luton, did very well. Then went somewhere else and failed. Stoke, he's been at Stoke as well and failed. So the only club he's really done well at is Luton. And his work was obviously then continued by Rob Edwards. So it didn't show Nathan Jones as he was the man that progressed Luton, if that makes sense. Rob Edwards come in and did just as good, if not better. So Nathan Jones's, I think, reputation is kind of on the line at Charlton. They have started the season well, but we have seen in recent weeks, with now just 1 win in 4, that there are little cracks starting to appear, because if the opposition do score, it's very, very unlikely that Charlton go and score 2 goals to go and win the game. Normally they'll score 1 and maybe draw the game. But I can see why, if Nathan Jones did leave for Cardiff, you could probably see why. It'd probably be more money. It's a championship club, and if it is his hometown club, then you'd probably take it.
The only thing I'd argue is he's probably joined Charlton expecting the rebuild almost, and knowing that he'll get the backing there. And we know Charlton are a club with resource. I imagine probably at the minute not as much as Cardiff, but I don't imagine he'll be on a working man's salary anyway. If we put it that way, a layman's salary at Charlton at all. So yeah, I think he's fine at the minute. I don't think he will stay at Charlton, I imagine. Well, Luton seem to have turned it around, but yeah, interesting. And one more question that had come in. Bailey Cadamateri, obviously I follow Lincoln. How is he fitting in? I'll kind of monologue this one. But I think it's one of them. We saw with Joe Taylor last year that he took a while to fit in. It was annoying. Obviously, you bring in this lone player, and the way that Lincoln have used lone players, you look at the likes of Rodgers and Johnson in the past. We use lone players as kind of like gospel, effectively, and they take time to settle in. That's the kind of thing. He came in late in the window. He's not going to be, like Joe Taylor was at the end of last year straight away. The annoying thing is for me, and I was having a chat with someone about it the other day. I think it was Jamie actually, of the review podcast. There's not really, like, we're not playing to his strengths. He's pacey, he can get in behind the back man with the ball played on the floor. Like, he's got the pace to beat his man. Why then have Lincoln all of a sudden started switching to long balls, which, I imagine we'll talk more about Lincoln in a future podcast, but they've switched up styles of play, which has been incredibly frustrating to watch because it's made for some really, really dull games, and that doesn't play for Cadamarteri's strength at all. So, yeah, I think he'll get there eventually, and I think, we saw last year Cambridge United was kind of the catalyst for Lincoln City's incredible run. So I don't know. We'll see. From an outside perspective, Sam, I know you'll be coming up against him in a week's time. I think it is, isn't it? But
Indeed.
Your thoughts on Cadamarteri?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because everyone's going to compare him coming in to Joe Taylor. Joe Taylor, obviously, exceptional towards the end of the season for you, and wasn't a prolific goal scorer, shall we say, for Sheffield Wednesday last year. So he's come in on young shoulders with all this pressure of, you are our saviour to Lincoln City fans, near enough of, you're going to get us 20 goals and get us into the playoffs. That's near enough what he's come in to do, which is a lot of pressure on young shoulders, which probably doesn't help. I don't know how much he played for Sheffield Wednesday at the start of the season. He probably hasn't had a proper pre-season. Either didn't know if he was going to go, didn't know if he was going to stay, so probably didn't have the best of pre-season. So he's probably still building up to fitness as well. I think when he first burst onto the scene at Sheffield Wednesday, you could see his goal-scoring ability. So there's no doubt in my mind that the goals will come. It may just take him six or so games to actually get his feet under the table, so to speak. And by then, there'll be another international break, so he may have to just start again. And that international break may actually come at a good time for him as well, because I can't see, other than 2 or 3 Lincoln players, that you can have many on international duty as well. So it could be a good opportunity to work on some things on the training pitch as well.
Now, this is the bit of the podcast that at the start of the season I quite enjoyed. Enjoyed this part of the podcast. In recent weeks, it's not been too fruitful for yours truly. The last week's predictions that we do. Sam, you've got a massive grin on your face. I'll let you go through this because it's not been great for me the last week and a half, shall we say?
No, so I think it was a 19-point gap you had 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
so that gap
I had double your points. Yeah.
So after this week, the gap is down to 6 points after 2 strong weeks. Oh. So this week I got a total of 14 points. I got 3 correct scores and 5 correct outcomes. So if you're unfamiliar with this, you get 3 points for getting a correct score and 1 point for a correct outcome in a game. And Callum, you got 5 correct outcomes this week. So it gave you 5 points. The outcomes you got correct were Wycombe, Cambridge, Peterborough, Bristol Rovers, Wrexham, Crawley, Rotherham, Birmingham, Mansfield and Shrewsbury. I got exactly the same 5 outcomes correct, except I had Burton Barnsley in there, as well as Lincoln Wigan. And then 3 correct scores I got Leyton Orient versus Peterborough last night correct with a 2-2 draw. Rotherham versus Birmingham and Mansfield versus Shrewsbury Town. So the gap this week is down to 6 points. I'm now on 43 and you're now on 49.
Not great. I'm not a big fan of this. Can you go back to being a bit crap at your predictions? Like, can we go back to that? That was not
My
fair.
statistical predictions are now working, and your
Just
Uranus is fading.
No, it won't. Uranus will always win. It will always win. Let's get on to looking at some games in detail. Then the bulk of the podcast: Crawley against Bolton. Now, this one comes into with a bit of managerial uncertainty. I don't think at the time that we're recording this, Sam, I'm not sure if it's confirmed. Is it that Scott Lindsey is off from Crawley? But it looks like it's almost certainly a done deal, right?
Yeah, if you follow Peter O'Rourke on Twitter, he announced that the deal was done and will be announced today. Whether that happens or not is another story, but it does look like Scott Lindsey will be off to the team he beat in the playoff semi-finals last year, MK Dons, and beat them very well. Obviously, MK Dons has just been taken over by some Kuwaiti businessmen, so in terms, they had a lot of investment in their squad last year. This summer at MK Dons. They obviously got Maguire, who played for Crawley last year. They bought Liam Kelly, who played for Crawley last year. So there's already a couple of players he's already knows how to get the best out of. And if you look at someone like Liam Kelly, he was arguably one of the best central midfielders in League Two last season under Scott Lindsey. So he should be able to get the best out of the players that he's got there. For Crawley, obviously they've not won now in 5 games after a pretty solid start thought they had to the season, winning their first 2, but now no win in 4. They're not scoring goals now, joint lowest scoring in the league, along with Shrewsbury and Rotherham. Still only conceding the 8 goals, but there's too many mistakes from Crawley Town players, which is not unexpected, just purely because I don't think a lot of their players are League One level. They were being so well coached that they were getting results and they had that little bit of momentum behind them. But as soon as that momentum wears off and teams get up to fitness, Lindsey can only do so much from the sidelines, and it's up to the players on the pitch. You look at people like Wallacott, who's pretty solid goalkeeper, but makes too many mistakes with his feet, and that's costing Crawley points. And obviously with Bolton, we've obviously spoke a lot about Ian Evatt, another manager who we thought would get or bite the dust, so to speak. Some changes off the pitch behind the scenes, a change of captain last week with Santos losing the armband, and a pretty convincing win in the end against Reading.
The thing is, I don't want to go too much on this Bolton hype train already. Like, with the greatest of respects to Reading, sometimes they can show up, and like that'll be because of the adversity that they've currently got. And don't get me wrong, when it's a tricky game, when it's a dirty game, I'll back Reading. But because they've just not got, we talk about it's not just an 11-man game now. It's almost a 16-player game now. We talk about it a lot of the time, where it's like the 11 that you start the game with, and then the 11 that you finish the game with are likely going to be completely different, but they've still got to be good quality sides, right? You've got to have that 11, and Reading just don't have it. So I'm not too convinced by Bolton at the minute. Still, obviously, I'm not doubting the quality of the players. I'm just doubting whether the players are buying into what Evatt's got to do. I mean, clearly scoring 5 goals is one way to prove that they are, but that was against Reading. So, and Crawley again, if the manager does depart within the next 48 hours, 72 hours, as we're recording this, then that's, it's going to be an incredibly difficult match for Crawley, and it's not exactly going to be the best representation of if Bolton have actually bounced back, I don't think. So, I don't know. I think I know where I stand on this one. I do think I'll go with a Bolton win. Obviously, I predicted that Crawley won't net. It's just by, is it going to be a nice one for Bolton where they just cruise past, or is it just going to be a Bolton still not as good as they are? I'm going to go 3-0. I think 3-0 is about fair.
Okay. I've gone for 4-0 to Bolton. I'm backing Dion Charles to probably and hopefully my fantasy EFL team, because at the moment the fantasy EFL is going really well for me. I'm second in like the deck league, and then top of our League One Lowdown league. And if you're not in that league, in our tweets, I'll tweet it out again tonight. I'll link the League One Lowdown league. So get involved in the league. Potentially at the end of the season, we'll do some sort of prize for the winner, which will hopefully be me. So yeah, I've gone for 4-0 to Bolton in this game.
I think that's kind of dependent if Lindsey does go, but even if he doesn't go, you'd also argue that they're not on the right run of form. So
what I'm expecting with Crawley is, because of the state of some of their owners, one of them will be on. I remember when somebody from their ownership was on the touchline a couple of years ago when they were fine relegation league. So an owner went onto the touchline to manage a game. So don't be surprised if he leaves. An owner is in the dugout for this weekend.
Well, it'd be a scene, wouldn't it? I don't know how often that happens in League One. Talking about owners, and one that has a lot of money is that of Birmingham. See, I'm smooth at transitions. This one, well, we should mention Crawley is one of the 12:30 kickoffs. We'll get on to the other 12:30 kickoff as well in a moment. But Birmingham against Peterborough. This one, title. I feel like these are like the titans of the league, Sam. Aren't they really? Like two titans. You almost picture it of like Godzilla and Kong fighting each other or whatnot again. I think Birmingham are really. I think we called them the what did we call them in the review podcast? The Galacticos. I think we called them the League One Galacticos. So yeah, I think Peterborough are good, but I just think Birmingham are now they're up and running. They're on a different league, I think.
Yeah. I think we're starting to see the effects of £35 million worth of transfer expenditure from the summer. They've won 5 in a row. Weirdly though, they've only kept 17% of clean sheets this season. So I believe they've only kept 1 clean sheet in the 6 games. So they are vulnerable defensively, and we know how good Peterborough are going forward. The big problem Peterborough have at the moment is they have 1 fit centre back. Oscar Varlin went off injured last night. It looked like some sort of hip injury. So they ended up playing a different system. They played a back 5 last week, which is not something that we ever associate with a Peterborough United side. But they've played a back 5 in their last game, and they played a back 5 last night against us. But they are down to just Fernandez being their only fit centre back, with Katongo and somebody else filling the back line. I can't remember the other player. But they look extremely vulnerable at the back. And when you've got Jay Stansfield, you've got Alfie May, you've got Hansen, you've got Paik, you've got Leonard. That's just naming a few. There's probably many others that I've forgotten. It could be a really high scoring game. If Peterborough have their mojo going forward with Ricky J. Jones and Mothersill, who both performed relatively well last night, but you've got so much pace in the front line, which will, I think, hurt Birmingham, because I don't think their centre halves are the most mobile, and Bielik and Clara. So this could be a high scoring game. But like I said, I think we're just starting to see the effects of Birmingham's summer transfer business starting to come to the foyer now.
I do clicking. Yeah,
seeing things clicking.
I feel like they're rolling. Like they're the only team that have got 5 wins on the row in the league at the moment. Wrexham, obviously, with a defeat a couple of games ago, means that they're not part of that. And obviously, Wrexham have played a game more. So should Birmingham win their game in hand, which I believe was from the international break, they'd be 3 points clear at the top of the table. And I doubt that if they got to the top of the table, we're going to see them off the top of the table between now and May. But then again, it's Peterborough, so they could just win. Like it's Peterborough, just one of those sides that they could be shocking against a Cambridge or a Shrewsbury, but then could just, I don't want to say surprise Birmingham, but outplay them.
Yeah, I think it's all going to depend on Peterborough's mentality, isn't it? Will they cave in terms of another sold-out atmosphere, because they are a young squad? They probably haven't played in front of 28,000, 30,000 before. So will the players go into their shell a little bit, which is understandable if you're a young player going to a big stadium like that, and you've got the pressure of 3 points on your shoulders, because it's not like, let's say, a Crawley going to Birmingham. There's no pressure on you. You're Peterborough United in League One, so you are a little bit of I'd say you're a bigger club in League One, so there is that pressure on you to at least go there and be competitive. So it could work both ways, this game. But with the Peterborough's defensive struggles and being one of the only two sides not to keep a clean sheet this season, along with Mansfield Town, I'm going to go with 3-1 to Birmingham.
Yeah, I think it's in that realm. I think 3-1 kind of feels like the obvious choice, and I'm annoyed that you picked it because I don't want to copy you.
It might be the best ploy at the moment with the way you're
talking. Sod it, yeah, 3-1. I'll go 3-1. I can see it being that, but I don't know how this game will play out. We'll go through the other games in the league, but before we go to an ad break, I'll leave you with a bit of trivia, and Sam will give you the answers, I believe, after the ad break. 2 questions for you then. Only one team has had both teams scoring in every game. Who is that? And only one team has scored at least 2 in every League One match day so far. Who is it? We'll go to an ad break now, and we'll give you the answers after this. Welcome back to the League One lowdown here on the Debt Networks. Callum and Sam with you. We'll go through the remainder of the games in a moment. But if you just heard that, if you heard our trivia just before that ad break, Sam, I believe you've got the answers for us.
Oh, I do. So if you haven't paused it and had a guess at an answer, leave them in the comments. So pause it now and then come back and hear the answers, because we want to get people involved. So the answer to the first question, which was only one team has had both teams scoring in every game. Who is it? The answer is Mansfield Town. And only one team has scored at least 2 in every League One match day so far. That club is Wycombe Wanderers.
They must have scored exactly twice in every single game, because they've got 12 goals for. That is quite impressive. So if you want to put a bet on, not that I'm a betting man, I'd argue Wycombe to score 2 is probably the most dead set one at the minute, right? I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd probably go with that one. Which means now they'll either score 1 or 2 times, or 3 times this week. So anyway, we went through one of the 12:30 kickoffs that you can watch for your viewing pleasure if the streams work. The other one is Reading against Huddersfield Town. Sam, this match kind of feels like 2 sides who are in desperate need of a win, but for different reasons, right?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to say they're desperate for a win for Huddersfield, isn't it, when they're sitting in 5th? But 3 defeats in 4 is lower mid-table form, shall we say? They seem. I have looked at their squad. They don't seem to have any serious injuries across the pitch. I think Yelik went off last night in the defeat to Blackpool, which could be. I don't know how serious the injury is, but that could be quite bad for Huddersfield, because he is a huge threat, not only from set pieces but in defending the box. But on the flip side, for Reading, off the pitch, I mean, the takeover, as we mentioned last week, has fell through. The club is back out for tender near enough. The under-21s pulled out of their league, and I believe the National League Cup, I think they were in as well. No, 1 win in 4 off the pitch. Some injuries floating around the squad. Obviously, we know it's not a deep squad with only the one summer signing. Now sitting in 18th place in League One. There is apparently funding there for the next couple of months for the squad, in terms of they'll get paid, but after that we don't know. So like we've said many times, it's a really sorry state to see for Reading Football Club. But in terms of the game, Huddersfield are the best in the league apparently for creating chances, with the highest XG, which is 12. But like we say, have lost 3 of their last 4, and Reading sit 9th in XG with 8.8. So Reading are more than capable of creating chances, and they're not terrible defensively, conceding 10. There's a lot there. I'd say they're lower mid-table. So it's a shame to see what's happening at Reading, shall we say. I think And I think fair play to Ruben Sellers. I know he's been quite vocal about it as well in his press conferences, and he could very easily just go, sod this, because he is a
no one would blame him. No one would
very
blame him.
well respected coach in the game, and he could very easily just go, sod this, and just leave. And he will probably get another job very easily. But he's sticking at it because he knows that if Reading get the right owners, they've got the fan base there, they've got some very decent players as well, that they can climb back into the Championship.
It's probably worth a podcast on its own. I'd be interested in just getting a few Reading fans on and talking about the situation, because it's one of them that feels like any other club or most other clubs, it'd get so much more publicity.
Yeah.
But they just feel like they're being dragged through the mud just for his entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
I would agree. Yeah.
It almost feels like he's getting entertainment from this and saying how bad it is. And like you say, if your under 21s team is pulling out of tournaments and whatnot, what does that say for the future of the club? No young player is going to want to join it. So that's that future investment or future line of player sales and player growth out the window as well. So it's a real shame. But and I say hopefully we'll be able to do a podcast on that in the future. But in terms of the actual game on the pitch, I'd argue Huddersfield probably got the quality to outclass eventually, and I'd probably go 2-0 Huddersfield. I can kind of see Huddersfield. I feel like this is a game they should win. We said that about Blackpool, who finally seem to be kicking into gear under Steve Bruce, but Huddersfield have got the quality, and they'll. I mean, we talk about clicking as a team, and they'll get there. I mean, a couple of games ago, they were everyone's favourite to win the league, and now we're talking about it as a must-win game. So opinions change quickly, shall we say?
Yeah, if my maths is correct, we're nearly a fifth of the way through the season now already, which is weird to say after 7 games, but a lot of clubs look at the games in 5th chunks, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think, like you said earlier, we're starting to see patterns in terms of performances, and stats start becoming more reliable, form tables become more reliable, and we're starting to see tables that kind of take shape a little bit now. Obviously, there's probably still some outliers of where they probably are in the table. I still expect Bolton to climb the table. Rotherham we'll get onto a bit later. I don't actually see them climbing the table very quickly. But yeah, you've gone for 2-0. I've gone for 2-1 to Huddersfield because you nicked my 2-0.
Well, let's move on. 2 more games to look at in detail. Barnsley against Stockport. Stockport, who everyone was raving about. They almost feel like two sides who have swapped places in recent weeks. Stockport, who we were all raving about after those first 3 games, 3 wins on the trot, joint top of the league, I think at the time. Since then, they've only got 2 more points in the last 3 games, 2 draws and defeat last time out. Barnsley, I think we were a bit meh about them. I think they was it a loss and a win win and draw from their first 3 games, and then since then they've won 3, lost 1. I feel like I don't want to say they're cooking again, like Birmingham are, because I don't think there's as much hype around Barnsley. But from a side that we all expected to struggle, they're doing all right now.
Yeah, and fair play to Darryl Clark. He's getting a tune out of the players every time they seem to bounce back. He goes at them in the press, which I love because it's honest, and they pick up some results. Obviously, they're the only team to have over 2.5 goals in every single game this season in League One. So they're probably the League One entertainers, are Barnsley, with 12 goals scored and 10 conceded, which is, I suppose, a concern for Darryl Clark. He'd probably quite like them to be a bit more sure at the back. But if you're just going to outscore your opponent, the fans would probably want it that way. Obviously, we know Barnsley have arguably got one of the best midfields in the league. People like Adam Phillips, Luke O'Connell in the middle of the park. I know they've scored 12 goals, but I still worry about the 3 strikers they've got. But obviously, adding Keylor Dunn to the mix was a pretty impressive bit of business. Stockport obviously are now without a win in 3 and have their first defeat last time out, conceding 4. But a lot of them were down to individual errors, and more so at League One, obviously, than League Two, because of the quality of player mistakes are more highly punished at this level. Obviously, they've had their own injury concerns at the start of the season, which probably hasn't helped with players now coming back to fitness. So they're trying to get up to speed while playing in a competitive environment, which probably doesn't help, but that's football. And I'd still expect Stockport to be top 10-ish around the end of the season. I think they're just probably going to go through a little blip like every club does when they get promoted and the momentum's kicked a little bit out of them. They just have to adapt their style probably a little bit. But Barnsley could be a good opponent for them with their defensive frailties.
I mean, I look at Stockport's upcoming games in October. It's almost like they've got one easy game and then one hard game, as is the league. They've got, obviously, a tough game in Barnsley, I'd say, and then they've got Shrewsbury away, which, Shrewsbury, you'd argue, is, for a team who wants to be in the top half, almost a nailed on 3 points. But then you've got Wigan, who are a horrible team to play against, as Lincoln City found out. They will dull the life out of you and just make it a very boring game. And then Wycombe at home, you'd argue they're probably favourites-ish for that, perhaps. But then Charlton away, tough game. So it's one on, one off, really, for them. But that's kind of how this league is. It almost feels like there is becoming like an established top third, an established middle, and then an established bottom third. And, that's fine. It still makes this league very entertaining and very competitive. In terms of this game, which is probably what we should focus on. I'd argue Barnsley. I'm probably a bit more confident in them.
Okay.
Like in terms of like, they're finally clicking. I mean, that's literally, we're gonna take a shot every time we say the word clicking now or anything like that for the next couple of pods, because that's what this part of the season is about. We're about to see the clubs that are really motoring on all cylinders and the ones that just aren't properly working. And that's, I'd argue, the next couple of weeks, maybe the next 3-4 weeks, we're probably going to see quite a few managers lose their jobs if the teams aren't clicking. But for Barnsley, the home advantage again has to mean something. So 3-1, I'm thinking.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to go for a draw in this one before I put your score in the wrong section like I have many times before. I'm going for a 2-2 draw in this game.
Interesting stuff. I'm regretting sometimes going first in my predictions, because if I go for the same scoreline as you, then I don't lose points, and that's kind of what I probably should be doing, because I have the higher ground now. If I just matched your predictions every single time, I'd win the season. So, so that's probably a mistake on my part. Anyway, the final game we'll look in detail before we rally through the rest of them. Orient against Wrexham. Sam, your team. So I'll leave you to monologue this. Despite your somewhat bounce back from a tough start to the season, Wrexham, they've got, 4 wins in the last 5.
Mm-hmm.
They're a good side, Wrexham are. Mm-hmm. So your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, their only defeat was to Birmingham City. I watched that game. It's a bit difficult to compare them because obviously we've played Birmingham, but we played Birmingham at home and played them at a different point in the season in terms of their gelling of a squad, shall we say. But we gave Birmingham a better game than Wrexham. Obviously, in terms of style of play, our styles of play are quite similar in terms of us and Birmingham. Two contrasting styles in terms of Orient and Wrexham. Obviously, Wrexham were renowned for a bit more of a direct play and picking up second balls. They're actually the biggest overachievers, Wrexham, in terms of their expected goals overachieving by 6.5. And if you look at some of the goals they've scored, it's pretty easy to see why that is. I believe Paul Mullin is still yet to score at League One level, obviously just coming back from injury, which is why I was surprised to see him start. Obviously, he didn't face any retrospective action for his attempted bite of the Birmingham City player's leg in the game that was on TV.
Well, I think he put a tweet out for it, didn't he? It was like, you see what you want to see or something like that. It was quite...
It looked like he was biting him.
It's almost as clear cut as that one in the Championship the other day.
Oh, my God, yeah.
God, interesting. But anyway.
Obviously, Jack Marriott doing Jack Marriott things so far this season, having the faith of a manager in League One. He scored 4 goals so far this season, being their top goal scorer. Before in, obviously, a bit of an upturn in form. smashing Stockport, keeping a clean sheet against Reading, and a very dominant performance last night against Peterborough. Obviously, Wrexham have had the week off, so my concern with Orient is they played last Tuesday against Brentford, Saturday against Stockport, Tuesday against Peterborough. They're playing Saturday now against Wrexham, and then they're playing next Tuesday against Exeter, and then they play Lincoln. So there's so many games in a short amount of time. So I wouldn't be surprised if we made some changes to try and keep things fresh. But I'm seeing signs like out of possession yesterday. We were so aggressive, and the amount of the final third turnovers we got, mainly because Peterborough are a possession-based team and they don't go away from it. Where Wrexham are a different beast. Wrexham will get the ball and they'll just launch it, and that poses a different threat because the gaps between our defenders and midfield were quite large because we were so high up. We usually pick the ball up from the final third, but this is going to be direct, so the gap has to be smaller, which changes the way we're going to have to press them. And that could work in Wrexham's favour. You've got people like Lee, Evans, Cannon, who can all manipulate the ball extremely well for League One level. But then you've got our little flair players like Galbraith, our ex Sean Clare, who's recently moved into midfield. So I think it'll be quite a good game, and based on Orient's last two games, which is something we're not renowned for, of being a quite open team, because there was a statistic released earlier based on the past 3 seasons in terms of the top 4 leagues. We're 4th best in terms of most clean sheets. And that's roughly since Richie Wellens has taken charge. So we're not really an open team, but we seem to have released the shackles a little bit in the past couple of weeks. I think this is going to be an incredibly difficult game. Wrexham are 7th in XG conceded with 9.1, and we are 10th with 8.6. So, but we do have the lowest expected goals in the league, but you could probably put that down to some of the clubs we've probably played. In terms of we've played Stockport, we've played Birmingham, we've played Charlton, we've played Bolton. So we're at home, but we are going to be fatigued. Wrexham have barely played any games in the past 2 weeks. I need to put faith in us because we've played well recently. So I will go with a 1-1 draw.
I don't know. It's one of them where you're in good form, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Leyton Orient come out on top. But I have to back the team that's currently top of the league. You kind of have to, don't you? Really, I think. So that makes me think it'll be 2-1 Wrexham.
Okay.
But I feel like they're kind of the results that you need to grind out. If Wrexham are to be playoff contenders, even automatic promotion contenders, I always think I was listening to another podcast, but Wrexham have got a lot to prove this year. There's talk of, I think, Ryan Reynolds and whatnot have invested into another club in Mexico. So there's a lot of worry that the story of Wrexham could be over soon, and they're going to want to try and prove to Rob and whatnot that there's still juice in this story, that people still want to watch it. So I think they've got enough to prove to themselves. So I go 2-1 Wrexham. And that's it for the games that we're going to cover in depth this week. We'll go through the rest of them just to get some predictions on it. Blackpool versus Burton. Burton, I think I need to double check this. Are they still waiting for their first win of the season?
Still without a win,
and they're into the drop zone now as well.
I was going to ask you this question. I've got 3 managers for you. Which one's going to first be sacked? Gary Monk. They're still without a win. Mark Robinson of Burton, because they haven't won.
Yeah.
And Matt Taylor of Bristol Rovers, because they're 20th now and have had 4 defeats in 5.
You're lucky to not throw Steve Evans into that mix.
And Steve Evans as well, yeah.
Yeah. I'd argue Gary Monk. I mean, we said that last week was his last straw, and I think they lost, didn't they? So I'd argue that Monk his ship's already sunk.
Yeah.
They're just waiting to retrieve the body, if that makes sense. Obviously, we'd talk about managerial departures. It's kind of been a bit of a renaissance since Bruce took over. It managed 4 games and they've won 3 of them, right?
Yep.
Like, pretty impressive turnarounds. You can't really ask for much more in League One. It's kind of catapulted Blackpool back to where people would have expected them to be. This one, I kind of feel like, is an obvious result, really. 3-0, I'd argue, probably. Maybe 3-0. Go 3-1. I imagine
3-1.
Burton might grab a goal. Although if they only scored, I don't know how many they've scored this
8.
year. So they've got a goal in them.
Yeah.
You have to go up to Leyton Orient for a side who have scored more in the league. You have to go up to 16th. So they're the highest scorers in that bottom third of the table. Doesn't mean that they're not conceding enough goals. You look at them though, that they've only got a -2 goal difference. Again, you have to go up to Stevenage for a side with a better goal difference. So when you're talking about Burton, you're talking about games with tight margins, just never in their favour, right?
Yeah, I think that's where you expect like an experienced manager to find them little match-winning moments, isn't it? Because they tweak something in a game that gets them the 3 points. And obviously, Robinson's not the most experienced first-team manager. He's obviously very experienced at youth level. I've gone for 3-1 to Blackpool. I've watched a bit of Blackpool, and that like a typical Steve Bruce team, they've become extremely potent from set pieces, like extremely potent.
They were clinical on I think it was the counter-attack as well last night against Huddersfield. So that one, you'd imagine Blackpool would continue that run. Bristol Rovers, another side who are in a bit of trouble. We say that they're the side of mid-table mediocrity, well, they're kind of ruining that label at the minute. They play Wickham. Wickham are a side that I think they're unbeaten now in 4 against a Bristol Rovers side who've only won 1 in 4. Interesting game, this one, because you'd imagine Bristol Rovers. I hate being so mean, but they're the average team, aren't they? So when they're not average, when you're not average, you expect them to balance out eventually, but they're not doing that at the minute. So, I've got 1-1 in my mind. I haven't predicted a draw yet, so I think I'll go 1-1.
Okay, I've gone for Wickham to keep up their 2-goal scoring streak, and I've gone for 2-1 to Wickham. They were very impressive last night and rested a lot of their first team players for the cup game against Villa, so fitness won't be an issue.
And they didn't exactly put themselves to shame, did they? It was only 2-1 in the end. So
yeah, they scored 95th minute.
This one I think is a great game. I'm looking forward to this one, actually. Cambridge versus Lincoln City. I keep on thinking about last year, and when Lincoln fans weren't sure about Skabala, this was one of the games that really showed us what was possible for Skabala, and we saw that run that the Imps went on. I'm not saying that that's going to happen this year. I'd like it to happen. But yeah, I think this one's fairly simple for Lincoln. 3-0, I'd imagine.
I've gone for 2-0 to Lincoln and then Gary Monk to be sacked.
You gone with this one being Lincoln do have a record of being the side that a lot of managers are sacked against. I don't know what it is. I think they're one of the highest teams in terms of like last games for managers. I don't know what that says about Lincoln or what happens when you lose to Lincoln, but we'll go with it. Northampton against Mansfield, 2 sides you'd expect to be mid-table of the season at the end of the season. But Mansfield have been all right, to be fair. They started well, and then they've already had a bit of a slump, but then they've bounced back and got back-to-back wins. Northampton, again, similar story, just a bit more inconsistent. Your thoughts on this one, Sam?
I think this will be a 1-1 draw. But obviously, Mansfield have won their last 2, both 2-1. And Northampton got an incredibly impressive win, 3-1 victory at Huddersfield last week. I think Northampton are a pretty solid team at home. So I've gone for a 1-1 draw. Yeah,
I can kind of see where this one's going. It's one of those mid-table games, isn't it? But Mansfield's, they've not played an away game. I don't think this month. This is their first away game this month. They were at home against Shrewsbury, at home against Cambridge United. Obviously, they were away. They were meant to be away against Wickham, but obviously that match postponed because that was the international breaks. So their first away game this month. Going back into August, and their away record, other than that Barnsley win, is not great. So, yeah, 2-1 Northampton.
Oh,
Why not? Mix it
yeah.
up a little bit. Why not? Shrewsbury against Rotherham, two sides that, well, who knows what's going on with both
Desperate
of
for
them.
wins, aren't they?
Well, they're both desperate for wins, but again, the context around it's so different, isn't it? Rotherham, they're desperate for wins because they shouldn't be 21st. Shrewsbury are desperate for wins because they expect to be 23rd, but don't want to be 23rd. So, yeah, this one I'll go with Rotherham to win, but only 1-0. I don't think it's going to be pretty at all.
No, I can see why, because Rotherham have actually scored the same number of goals as Shrewsbury. And even though Shrewsbury have scored 5, I believe 3 of them were against us. So from the other 6 games, they've scored 2, which is alarming. So I've gone for 2-0 to Rotherham. But Rotherham have only also scored 5 goals. But you've seen slow signs of improvements. Obviously, they got 2-2 draw at Burton, a 1-1 draw against Charlton, which is fine at Charlton. They obviously beat Huddersfield 2-1 through a contentious penalty, as I should say. But they lost to Birmingham City last week. And obviously, Steve Evans, in a press conference, was actually quite complimentary of an opposition, shall we say, which was quite nice to hear.
That's unusual. 2 more games, one of which is quite interesting. The other one is the definition of mid-table. Stevenage against Charlton is the interesting one for me. Yeah, it's got a boring game written all over it, but I'd imagine Charlton to come out 1-0 winners. Like we say, we always refer to the Portsmouth model of just grinding out results, and that's what you need to do. And yeah, I'll go 1-0 Charlton.
I've gone for 0-0. 2 teams that have scored between them 7 plus maths, 7 plus 5, 13 goals. I think. Was that 12? It's 12.
Sometimes stats are there to be broken, so you never know.
So they've scored less goals. They've scored the same number of goals as Barnsley between them. Same number of goals as Peterborough. Less than Blackpool. Same as Wickham. So.
It's going to be an interest. I think it's going to be a tactical game, not known for its entertainment factor, to say the least. And the definition of mid-table, Wigan against Exeter. This one could either be a thriller or a really, really boring game. Sam, you're scratching your head there. Is that because you're interested in how boring this game is going to be, or just confused by it?
I don't really know if I can predict another 0-0. I can't have 2 0-0s in there because this game, if you look at Wickham's last 2 results, they've both been, I'm pretty sure Wigan's last 2 results have both been 0-0. They drew 0-0 last night against Stevenage, and it was one of the boring games ever.
0-0 against Lincoln, yeah.
They drew 0-0 with Lincoln. They beat Bristol
Rovers. That was also
Rovers
a boring
4-0,
game, yeah.
Which, if you take, theory, they take the 4 goals out, they've scored 2 goals in 6 games as well, which is the same as Shrewsbury. So they can't score goals. But Exeter are one of them teams where they pull rabbits out of hats, I call it. They've got quality players. I really like Ed Francis in midfield. They got an impressive 2-0 victory against Stevenage. Exeter are quite good at home, and I don't think they're as good away, and it's a bloody long journey from Devon way to Manchester way.
Yeah.
I'm going to go a 1-1 draw.
That's annoying because that's exactly what I had in my mind. So yeah, I'll go 1-1 as well. I feel like both sides, well, Wigan have got to eventually score, and I think Exeter Exeter. And I think that's all you can say about them, isn't it, really? But that's all for the preview podcast. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, do all that good stuff that every other place tells you to do, but actually do it for this place instead of them, because this is the best League One preview podcast. A big thanks to Sam for joining me. Sam, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And that's it. Thank you for listening.